Hello and welcome to the Daily Racing Form webinar about using DRF formula for contest play at Saratoga. We are sponsored by the New York Racing Association today. I'm your host, Peter Thomas Fornatale, joined today by two special guests. I just gave them flowery intros on the podcast we recorded about an hour ago, so I'm just going to cut to the quick and say he is the founder and editor of PublicHandicapper.com. He is Scott Carson. Scott, what's up?
Thanks for having me, Pete. It's great to be here, and I look forward to not only showing people how we use Formulator, but also all the good stuff in Public Handicapper that they might not know.
And we also have the stalwart of these webinars, the Director of Product Marketing. You know him on Twitter as @DRF Formulator. He is my podcast co-host, Mike Hogan. How are you, Mike?
I'm doing great, Pete. This is should be another fun one.
I'm really looking forward to this. We're going to go over the specifics of what PublicHandicapper.com is. We're going to go over this spectacular deal we've been talking about this week. Tremendous opportunity for contest players to increase their edge by using the Formulator PPs and a chance for them to do so at a discounted price. Then we're going to dive into the specifics of Saratoga's late pick 4 on Saturday. We will be answering questions at the end and, where relevant, perhaps jumping in and doing some questions as the show goes by. If you want to submit a question, please feel free to do so using the tool on your webinar. You see how it works there with the screen that Mike just shared. You can submit a question. We'll try to get to as many as we can. If we don't get to your questions, but you still want to have them answered, feel free to reach out on Twitter. My Twitter handle, @LoomsBoldly. Mike, as mentioned, @DRF Formulator. Scott, how can folks find you on Twitter?
It's @CarsoniPH, so CarsoniPH.
PH for Public Handicapper. Beautiful stuff. If folks are interested in more content like this, we have a webinar archive from yesterday that we did with Gabby Gaudet about the various tools one can use to handicap maiden races. You can find that as well as an archive of all of our other webinars, including this one in a few hours, at drf.com/YouTube. In these webinars, we often cover a lot of ground. And if you want to go back and re-listen to something we said, if we covered it too quickly, you can catch those replays for sure. So starting the show today, I think we want to go back to that fundamental question about what is Public Handicapper. Mike, I believe you're going to do the screen share, but we should probably have Scott talk us through what Public Handicapper is, how long it's been around for, and some of the benefits of playing on it. Scott, why don't you start with the basics?
Okay, so it's a free contest. It's 4 races per week, usually on Saturdays. It's interesting, it's a unique contest in that everybody can see your picks. The idea is that we all have some craving to be a public handicapper, and this is our opportunity to show ourselves off. At the same time, you can also write an analysis so that you can be like the public handicappers that you read in the paper or in this day and age online. There's a lot of other interesting tools. So if you're baffled about a race, you can go in and see what other people think. You can see what other people are picking, and help that to sway your opinion.
And this isn't just something that you do to become a better player, though it will help. I have to say, I found in my own development as a handicapper that writing analyses of races, which I used to do many moons ago for the Saratoga Special up here in Saratoga, that process of writing your thoughts out can really help you to do a better job handicapping. And of course, reading the thoughts of other top players, for example, PH founder himself, Scott Carson. Also, the other public handicapper editors are pretty good about submitting written analyses every week, including Chris Larmy, who's been a guest on the show many times, very credentialed contest player, and the other guys up top, whether it's Wes or Roderick or D-Wade, these guys, or I don't want to leave out Steve-O, these guys do a really good job week in, week out between reading their analyses, writing your own analyses. You almost can't help but become a better contest player. Scott, you've been doing this a long time. Have you found in your years writing analyses of races that you've become a better player?
Absolutely. In fact, sometimes I will type out my comments about every single horse before I actually post. I'm gonna make my comments and post, but I edit them. So I will write what I think about each horse, and that clarifies things for me. And I begin to sort of convince myself, hey, this horse doesn't really have a shot. This horse, actually, that's one point. I got to remember that one point about that horse, like he's got a bullet work in his last race. So in that way, it helps to clarify things for me, and it also helps me to not forget things. Now I usually don't run through all the horses on my analysis because I think that gets a little tedious. So I usually just do my top three, and then maybe if I don't like the favorite, I'll say why I don't like the favorite.
I love that. I've never heard it put quite so well. You're underlining important points that you don't want to forget, and in a way it forces you to take a stand. In our brains, when we look at a race, it's very easy to be wishy-washy. When it comes to actually writing words on paper, and I actually really like that idea of, if only for your own personal development as a handicapper, to even write something about every horse, because it'll force you to take a stand. If you're any kind of writer and you look back at an analysis and you have 5 things where you're basically saying this is a peripheral contender, you're not going to want that. It's going to make you disciplined to go through and be able to separate those horses, and that's going to help you construct your tickets. Mike, I'll ask you, in your time, you've been a racing fan for a long time, but I feel like only since you became a DRF employee some 2.5 years ago have you done a lot of writing about racing, a lot of discussing in a public forum about racing on the podcast. Have you found that having to have your picks public and going through the process of writing about racing and talking about racing on the podcast, has that improved you as a handicapper at all, and if so, why?
Absolutely, and it can't help but improve you because, like you said, you have to take a stand. You have to not just come up with your opinion, but you have to crystallize it in a way that you can express it to other people in a manner that makes sense. And as you do so, you start questioning whether you really believe that and how strongly you believe that, and if you can stand behind putting it out there for other people to read and digest. It makes you make better plays. It makes you come up with stronger opinions. And the analogy I use sometimes, and you talked about, if there's five contenders, you say, marginal contender, like, or people that seem to like every horse in the race. It's like the guy in high school or college that's highlighting every line in the textbook. When you do that, once you do that, you might as well highlight nothing. It's only by underlining the important points and calling out the things that matter that make you move forward and learn something about yourself as a handicapper.
The other thing about Public Handicapper, actually the main thing, we're talking about Public Handicapper as an educational tool, but this is a chance to win great prizes, a chance to get to the NHC for free, and have a chance to go from a free buy-in to a chance to win your share of $2.5 million on offer at the National Handicapping Championship in January. Scott, go over the prize structure of the main contest, the Public Handicapper Challenge, so folks have an idea of what they're playing for.
Okay, and I'm sure it would help if Mike goes on to the rules, the rules button there.
You got it.
So the prizes are, there's 3 significant prizes. There's $1,500 for the winner. Well, there's 4 significant. Maybe there's 5. There's $1,500 for the winner. There's a 1-year subscription to Formulator, which is amazing, and you also get a trophy, which is great.
That's pretty cool. That's neat. Do you make trophies yourself, Scott? Is that something that's part of your responsibility?
I order this trophy every year. I've been ordering it for 17 years.
I want one of those.
I have a template, and it's not that hard to do. I always have to make sure they do the quotation marks as actual curly quotation marks around the player name. Then the other thing is that you can win a trip to the NHC in Vegas if you are a tour member. Last year, the guy who won he'd been playing for over 10 years, but he had never become a tour member. And he was kicking himself for not joining the tour. Now he's a tour member, and he's playing, and he's psyched about it.
Very cool. It'd be great if he can qualify this year. That'd be a really fun story to write. Before we clicked over to this page, Mike was over on the personal page of PH founder Scott Carson. What are we looking at here? Why don't you explain this to us?
So this is you can create your own standings, and really these standings are a variety of people. Usually, in my case, I put a lot of champions, and it's PH champions on here. Some people that I know whose opinion I respect, and also like Dark Horse. He won the very first Public Handicapper Challenge, but it looks like he isn't playing this year. And then we've had guest editors over the years that sometimes I put them in there. So like Gordo, who's also not playing this year, he used to be a Public Handicapper editor. Roby, the 16th player there, Roby, 1628 or 1028, he was a champion like in 2007. So it's just it's a way to check the people that you know, so that you don't have to click on the Find Player button. You can just go to one place, and if you have family members or friends who you're competing with, this is like your own personal standings.
It's pretty cool. And another thing I know that a lot of folks who play Public Handicapper use the tools on the site for is the odds that get created. Explain what I mean by that, Scott.
So the odds are based on only, they're weighted one person per pick. So it's actually pretty remarkable how close they approximate the real odds. So if you look under the Saratoga 8th there, if you look under number 7, Rappel, the morning line odds on that horse are 7-2, but the current PH odds are 13-1. So I will look at the odds to verify my opinion. If I think a morning line is wrong, I will say, let me check out how PHers are betting this thing and see if I'm right. And if Rappel was 7-2 here, then I'd be like, okay, that morning line must be right, and I'm dreaming that I think it might be 10-1. But I'm looking at it right now, and I'm saying, hey, it's 13-1 right now, so maybe this horse is going to be long odds, longer than the morning line, so I'm going to go ahead and pick it because I always want to try to get a price horse.
Put another way, these are the odds within the universe of the PH contest, and they can often predict with a little bit more accuracy than the morning line, especially as we get closer to race day and the closing of the contest, what those final odds will be. Could be a very interesting tool to use in multi-race wagers, in your contest preparation. Definitely one of the unique aspects of Public Handicapper. Another unique aspect has to do with the scoring system. Mike, are you familiar enough with the way Public Handicapper is scored to give the viewers today a rundown of how that works?
Wait, before you go on, Pete, just want to interject here. Mike, if you can click on Hot Herschel in the Saratoga 7th race, click on the horse's name. That's going to show you everybody who picked that horse. And if they have comments on the race, you can click on the analysis link over on the right.
Oh, that's neat. Yeah. That's really neat.
Carson City Tom. He says if he repeats last year's appearance, buyers-wise, there's no reason not to win with a clean race. Along with that, I'm throwing a ring around JJ as one of the graveyard victims.
So you get some eclectic comments there as well. You can scroll through. Just another way to get involved in the conversation with other horse players, a really neat feature of the Public Handicapper site. Back to the scoring question. Mike, are you prepared to answer that one?
Sure. Yeah, it's every pick you make, you get a $2 win bet. So it's your top pick. And if your horse wins, you get the mutual returned in the actual win mutual. If your horse loses, you get $2 deducted from your account, which is why you've got a number of people in the negative, and why if you don't make a pick at all, you just sit at 0 for those races. You don't get deducted for not making a pick.
Changes the strategy a little bit when you're in terms of contest play. You do something a little bit different with the cap, Scott. Why don't you explain what the cap is and give us the logic behind why it is what it is?
Well, the cap is 30 to 1, and the reason why we have a cap is because the very first year of Public Handicapper, somebody hit a 66 to 1. The guy who won it hit a 66 to 1, and he was the only one who had it, and he won the contest. So you know, I mean, that was a tremendous amount. That was a $132 payoff, and we just decided that we need some kind of cap so that there's not like an insane one horse pick that wins the contest. But at the same time, it's such a long contest with over 100 races that we thought, let's give it a generous cap. So $60 is pretty good, but you know, it's just to stop people from hitting that 133 to 1 or whatever. So you know, I think most people are okay with it, and at the NHC, the odds cap is 20 to 1, so it's still more generous than even the NHC.
I think it's a good logic, and it makes sense. The longer a contest is, the less important it is to have that lower odds cap in the DRF tournaments world. Also, we use that 20 to 1. Now, speaking of the connection between Public Handicapper and the DRF tournaments world, why don't we take a little tour over to this spectacular deal we teased at the beginning of the show. Scott, why don't you tell the viewers what that deal is and how it works?
All right. It's a little small on that screen, but it's basically $5 for an unlimited daily subscription to Formulator. So sometimes we have 4 different racetracks, and we asked players what they were, what would they change about Public Handicapper, and a few of them, a fair amount of them said, hey, we'd like a better PP deal because we might only be handicapping 4 races, and if they're at different tracks, that's going to be 4 separate cards on Formulator. So this way, if you're only capping the 4 races, it's like $1.25 a race. But you may also want to handicap the rest of the Saratoga card or the rest of the Del Mar card. And so we decided, hey, why not? Let's go whole hog, encourage people to give Formulator a try, and let them have a daily. So not only can you use it for the Public Handicapper races, but if you're playing other contests such as the DRF tournaments contests, you're going to get Formulator access to all of those tracks, which is going to give you an edge over the classic PPs, because with classic PPs you don't have breeding info, you don't have trainer patterns, you don't have replays, and these are all like instrumental in my handicapping and many top players that I know.
I've heard it time and time again from top tournament players how they use Formulator, whether they are married to the notes section and the ability to include their own subjective view of races and have those embedded in the lines of the PP, or whether they're just diving into some of the bells and whistles available in Formulator. We're going to be doing a full demonstration of that very shortly when we dive into the Saratoga late pick 4. Mike, for you didn't have a ton of experience in contest play before your time at DRF, but I know that you're a regular in the office pool. How important of a tool would you say that Formulator is to you in your own contest handicapping?
Well, it's particularly useful for me, and we'll do this a little bit when we dive into some of the races, which maybe we should start doing now, to look at certain trainers, and if I can find trends with certain trainers in certain spots where their horses regularly outrun their odds, or conversely ones where they're often vulnerable at short odds, because that's what you're looking for in a contest like Public Handicapper, where you don't know the odds prior to making your selections. A lot of these feeder tournaments that we do on the DRF tournament site, it's the same situation. You put your picks in, you don't know what the actual price you're going to get. So you have to use some history. You have to try and figure out, is this an angle where a trainer often improves their horses, or where they tend to regress a bit. And that's, for me, contest-wise, that is where I spend a lot of my time.
I love it. I just had 2 quick things I want to get to in the Public Handicapper overview, and then we will dive into this late pick 4 at Saratoga. The first one is, I feel like now that we have DRF tournaments running contests, typically 5 days a week, including low buy-in feeders. Their feeders today, I believe, as low as $12 on DRF tournaments. I just want to say to any of the public handicapper players who are watching this webinar that this is a great time to try to segue over from the free contest of public handicapper to the low buy-in contest. In past years, we've had it where the lowest buy-in contest we were offering was somewhere in the range of 100, maybe 50 for a credit builder. Now every day we've got contests as low as 15, some days as low as $12. We've seen a lot of new players migrating to the new DRF Tournaments platform. Some of them are already coming from Public Handicapper, but I don't think there's ever been a better time if you were serious about getting involved in contests at a higher level to segue from the PH world into the DRFT world. So I just wanted to underline that point. And then I also just wanted Scott to explain we're in the middle now of the Public Handicapper Challenge. It's still worth playing because there are weekly and monthly prizes as well as those NHCC prizes and the cash that make up the big prize pool. But Scott, if you can just give a very fast overview of what the Public Handicapper year looks like in terms of the 3 contests that you offer, just to remind folks of that one more time, and then we'll dive into these races.
All right, well, we have 3 contests. The main PH Challenge runs from Kentucky Oaks through the Breeders' Cup to over 100 races, and that's the one that will get you to the NHC if you win it and you're a tour member. Then we have the winner of our discontent, which runs from December through January, just to keep us connected to horse racing. And then we have the PH Prep, which runs from February through April. And the idea there is that we're going to do a lot of Kentucky Derby preps. It's going to keep us in the game so that when the Kentucky Derby comes along, we're ready to go. Now, as far as this particular contest, if you have not signed up for Public Handicapper yet, you are still eligible to win because it's not quite half over, and you can reach the minimum number of 60 races if you join this week or before next Saturday, the 30th. In order to win a trip to the NHC, you do have to have been an NHC member before the beginning of the contest, which was around May 6th. But even if you aren't a member, anybody can play, and we do have prizes every week. If you can pick 4 winners, you're going to get a 10-card subscription to Formulator, and if you win the monthly prize, you get a 30-day subscription. It's pretty good.
It's terrific. And joining Public Handicapper is the only way to be eligible for this Spa-tacular deal we mentioned before, where you can get the unlimited Formulator card for a Saturday for just $5, as you see with the thing on the screen right now. That's normally a $19.95 value. Great way to save money, introduce yourself to Formulator, use that to play on the DRF tournaments events on the weekend, use the weekly feeders to win into the qualifying events on Saturdays and Sundays. It's a great way to advance your contest play. All right, now the idea of the Spectacular bonus, get people familiar with Formulator. We are now going to look at some of the specifics of how players like Mike and Scott use Formulator to help them in their contest play, in their play at the windows as well. We're looking at the last 4 races from Saratoga on Saturday. That means we're going to start with the 8th. This is a race that potentially has a favorite who's going to be very tough to beat. When you're looking at favorites, and we'll start this question with you, Mike. Formulator, for me, it's not just about finding long shots. It's about evaluating favorites. When you're looking at this race, how are you going to deal with this tough-looking Chad Brown entry of the 1 and 1A?
Well, I think of the 2, the one is Wyeth is coming off of a maiden win, and he'll have to improve in order to beat this field. The 1A is the reason why the entry is favored, in my opinion, and it's based on that maiden win as a 2-year-old back in October. Chad gave the horse some time off. He came back as a 3-year-old in the graded stakes, was the 9-5 favorite, and ended up finishing evenly with a little bit of trouble in there. So what I look at is whether I think this horse is likely to improve, whether Chad Brown has had success or lack thereof with similar types of runners coming off of layoffs at short prices, say. And so there's a number of things that I will do. And Scott, I know you like to use the merged workouts. That's one of my favorite features in Formulator because I want to see how a horse has been working since certain races or between races if they've changed the work pattern. Since that last race, he's been working pretty evenly. They've had him up at Saratoga the whole time. It seems like they're readying him and we're targeting this meet. So I wouldn't be surprised if he's ready to go. And then I'll dive into Chad Brown's numbers. And of course, particularly a meet like Saratoga, I want to see, and this is a turf route at Saratoga, I want to see how a trainer has done with similar types. So we'll do turf routes at Saratoga, and no surprise, Chad Brown wins 29% of the time, 60% in the money, 230 ROI with all those runners in the last 5 years. Not surprising at all. You know, you can even add in off of the layoff at this regular level of an allowance race if you want. But no matter how you do it, Chad Brown still wins at a pretty high percentage and still gives you a good ROI at Saratoga. So in short, this particular favorite I think is looks pretty legitimate to me.
It's going to be hard to beat, it looks like, potentially, though I know Scott has a clever idea here. But before we get to Scott's opinion of this race, a couple of things I wanted to ask you, Mike. If you could just really quickly demonstrate again for folks, talking them through how they merge the workouts. I think that's a really good point and something people can really change the way that you understand the story of a horse. That's one of the themes on the podcast week in, week out, is me, you, and Jonathan talking about how the past performances tell the story of individual runners. The merge workout's a great tool for that. How do folks do it for themselves?
Well, absolutely, and one of the great things about Formulator is it's customizable. You know, I mean, many of the people, and hopefully everyone listening and watching, are familiar with the DRF paper PPs or the classic PPs. Formulator is interactive, so you can merge the workouts like I just did by checking that box. You can add in run-up and temporary rail distances, which I like to do, especially at certain circuits like Gulfstream Park. They might have the rails out at 108 feet, and other times they might have the rails at 0. So you'll see it, and here's an example right here. This Rappel, who I know Scott wants to talk about a little bit, was running in a race March 19th where the rails were at 108 feet. That can change and almost make two completely separate turf courses. Another thing, especially on the turf races, I like to change from elapsed time to incremental splits, so you can see the come-home times of the winner. If you change it to the particular horse, it shows the actual come-home times and incremental splits for the runner that you're actually looking at, which is, for me, incredibly useful and very helpful.
The other thing I wanted to ask, Mike, in a meet like Saratoga especially, you're going to be asking Formulator essentially a lot of the same queries. You might want to know how a trainer does with 2-year-old turf horses. Do you have to just go in and click those buttons every single time to get that query answered?
You don't. There are a number, and I have a few. I know, Scott, you're someone that likes to have, I have really only a handful saved. You can create new ones by clicking Add Profile. You name the profile. You do whatever filters you want it to be. Like you mentioned, one of the ones I have is 2-year-old dirt sprint first-time starters and maiden special weights at Saratoga, because that you see so much, and that is different from, in my opinion, 2-year-old first-time starters at nearly any other track in the U.S. But I don't, in most cases, use those, because what I do in my approach, and I know it's different for everybody, I add on filters on top of things. So Chad Brown, obviously we know. We're looking at Robert Roboto. I might want to just start with Saratoga and say, okay, how has he done in the last 5 years at Saratoga in general? 2 for 49, 33-cent ROI, not particularly great. The 2 wins were both the same horse, so 25 horses, only one of them won. And then I'll add in filters from there. Okay, well, just in turf races, gets a little better, 2 for 35, that sort of thing. So I will layer, what I call layering the filters, especially with trainers that maybe don't have as many runners as someone like Chad Brown.
And if you do want to create those profiles, it's easy enough, right, Mike? You can show folks how to do that really quick.
Yeah, you just click this plus button, add profile. You call it whatever you want. We'll say turf at Saratoga or Spa, and then you do turf at today's track. Click save. Click OK, and it's turf at today's track. So if we jump to another trainer like Jimmy Bond, click on him, it is now one of our drop-down options, and we can see turf at today's track.
We just got a comment in from somebody we know pretty well from Twitter, our buddy Paul Romanelli, who mentions that in terms of customizing PPs, you can print the PPs with or without the morning line. Is that a feature, Mike, that you ever take advantage of?
Absolutely. Morning line odds are in general, I mean, in the simplest of terms, they're another person's opinion about the horses in the race, and particularly what they think the market will land on and how the market will play out. A lot of times I do my handicapping prior to the morning lines being available, so I don't have to worry about that. But you're absolutely right. If you don't want to be influenced by somebody else's opinion, you can turn off the closer looks, which appear at the bottom of the PPs. You can turn off the morning line odds so that you're starting essentially fresh and not worrying about seeing something from another handicapper that colors your opinion.
And then maybe you can layer in their opinion later to help inform you. A lot of great information in those closer looks, especially in maiden races. It can be time-saving to see what they have to say, but I appreciate that idea of trying to come in from a fresh perspective, uninfluenced. Scott, we've gone down the formulator rabbit hole a bit here. That'll happen with the program with this amount of power. Let's bring it back to this race and this very tough-looking Chad Brown entry. You have another idea in here. Will you share that with our viewers now?
Sure. I do think the entry Catapult is going to be really tough to beat, and he's absolutely in my pick 4. I would not exclude him from the ticket, but I am a bit interested in Rappel. He ran, if you look at him right now, his last race he was 24-1, and he ran an 84 buyer figure, which is about as high, or I think it is the best last race buyer figure of any horse in the race, including the favorite. So
Mike just clicked on the buyer graph there, if you want to explain how that works, Mike.
This is just simply a visual representation of the buyer speed figures of every horse in the race, and you can toggle on or off certain ones. You'll see Rappel, he climbed up, and it's hard to see, but yeah, his buyer speed figure as earned was the top one, just beating out a number of the runners in the race. But in general, buyer speed figure-wise, there's a cluster at the top there from the last race.
Is there any particular?
Pretty wide open. Yeah, no, I was just going to say it's a pretty wide open race because of those buyers. That's why you don't want to be, putting everything, singling on Catapult.
It's always a dangerous way to fly when you're talking about singling short-priced favorites. Now, right. I know, Scott, you've used a lot of different aspects of Formulator over time. In fact, you gave out a few really cool applications for how you use Formulator when I interviewed you a couple of years back for my book, The Winning Contest Player. And I know that the trainer tool in particular is one that you also like to use. Whether it's in this race or if you just want to speak generally about how that trainer tool can help you find your opinion in contest races, this might be as good a time as any to talk about that.
Yeah, I mean, unlike Mike, I have dozens of saved trainer patterns that I want to quickly access. And just to give you an example, many horses. Many trainers specialize in winning with 2-year-olds, such as Wesley Ward, and other trainers specialize in winning with first-time starters at certain meets. So I have a 2-year-old first-timers with a first-time trainer, first-time starter with 2-year-olds, first-time starter with at the track, because some people will wait for Keeneland to try to capitalize. Then I'll have a prefabbed saved trainer pattern for 2-year-olds at the track, right? And that way I can just quickly run through them without having to go and choose each feature, right? And then later you can still choose one of these. You can choose one of these, like 2-year-old first timers at the track, and then if you want to add turf, you can. But in the meantime, yeah. So that's Robert Roboto, and what 2-year-olds first time starters. Did you choose at the track?
Yes, they're showing all Saratoga.
So actually, I mean, so this is too bad he doesn't have a first-time starter later, because he has 2 seconds, right? One at 34 to 1 and
right.
one at 14 to 1. So
right.
That's something like, hey, like that's not going to show up in his ROI. It's not going to show up in a lot of things, but it gives you an idea that, hey, this guy wants to win with a first-time starter. He just didn't quite get there with those 2 horses.
Yeah, these horses are firing at big prices, boy.
Yeah, I was just going to say that's a very good point, and that's one of the things I love to use the trainer portion of Formulator for, because you might see, for as a first-time starter trainer, or an example that I used on the Steve Bick show last week was Ray Handel, 0 for 8 in the first start-off Acclaim. Well, 6 of the 8 finished second, and 4 of them were beaten either a head or a neck. And these are horses that are outrunning their odds at 6, 8, 12 to 1. Same for Robbie Roboto. Finished second at 34 to 1, finished second at nearly 15 to 1. So if you're playing him in a contest, those are the kinds of horses that, either if they win, it's a huge price, even if the place money that you get from Knock running second at 34 to 1 is enough to push you forward in contest play.
And don't discount the value of finding a trainer who has horses who can run 4th at 30 to 1. I mean, there is this bet called the Superfecta, and I think if we see some good-looking Roboto horses later in the meet, I might be looking to key some of them bottom up in a bet like the Superfecta, because that's very impressive. And Formulator, this ability to not just see the top line of stats or try to have a rating on what a trainer does in a certain category, but be able to drill down and look at every runner. You're going to see patterns, and with the way Scott does it, especially with those easy-to-access profiles about how trainers typically do first time out, second time out, if you just look at that one distinction between a trainer, how they typically do first time and second time, you're going to notice trainers whose horses arrive fully formed. They don't do better, or maybe they even do a little worse typically second time out. That's going to tell you something that can inform not just those horses and how you bet them the first time out, but also the second time. And then you're going to see trainers whose horses typically improve second out, or sometimes it's not till the third start where you'll see that figure pop up. You can use Formulator to teach you so much about how trainers train. It's really going to help your play and your understanding, especially with lightly raced horses who I think we can all agree it's very difficult to evaluate all of them on figures alone. As figure-oriented as we are, I think you need to know something about how trainers train if you want to have success betting these lightly raced horses. Let's move on to our next race here. We've got about 20 minutes left, and we've still got 3 races to talk about. We want to make sure to give some opinions and to continue to evaluate these races. Scott, why don't we let you lead with your thoughts on this, other than the 9th at Saratoga on Saturday?
Okay. Well, I think that's unfortunately I don't love this race. I think that my man Sam is he's got a significant advantage. He's faster. He had trouble in the Kentucky Derby. We know a ton of horses have come out of the Kentucky Derby to win. Mike, do you want to click on the May 16th date there on the left? I love this feature to see how horses that ran in the race Tom's Ready, Gunrunner, Exaggerator.
I've got my chart options set to default to show the next race, so that's how you change it here. It usually shows the standard chart view, which is everyone's familiar with, but I want to see exactly what Scott's talking about. How did everybody do in their next start? Yeah, so no surprise the Kentucky Derby ends up being a live race.
Right. And, it's not always that live. It's super live this year. And, he was second in the Bluegrass to Brody's Cause. So I think he's a pretty strong favorite. And I'm going to throw in, for the pick 4, I'm going to throw in one other horse that is at the top of the page, and that's Gray Sky.
Yeah, I agree.
And if you look at it, Lucas he loves to win at Saratoga, and he loves to win with a price horse. Now, this horse isn't a huge price, but he's only 9-2 morning line, but he costs $700,000, and he's only got one win, and he doesn't have a win at 2 turns, which is definitely a flaw. But look at that last workout, a bullet on the training track at Saratoga. I think that everybody's going to be sending it in on my man Sam. And my pick 4 isn't that deep, so I think I can throw in Gray Sky just in case my man Sam doesn't run that well. Gray Sky's in there. He's getting a 4-pound weight break, and again, we know Lucas likes to win here. I don't know if you want to check out his pattern to see how he does at Saratoga.
Well, it's not terribly good. He hasn't. I don't know if he had a winner last meet, to be honest. And in the last 5 years, it's only at a 5% rate. But he occasionally does pop it. Yeah, at decent prices, because I think a lot of times his horses do get overlooked. And I think Gray Sky is going to be a fair price tomorrow. He was also running against a lot of really good horses. Gunrunner in last. He's faced Cupid and Creator. Even though he's not coming out of the Kentucky Derby like my man Sam, he's getting significant class relief being eligible for the none other than one condition, which he falls back into tomorrow.
We have a question that just came in, Mike, that I'd love you to tackle. It's about the charts feature, and it's about the incremental splits we were looking at before. What are the different options to show the fractions in the chart feature, and how do those relate to the incremental splits you were showing before?
Well, let me pick a race that doesn't have as much in the way of header in there. This one will work. So the different charts are the standard chart view, which of course everyone's familiar with. You can get the next race view, which of course I like. Even this race that Gray Sky ran, there were a couple next out winners, including the winner repeated in a stakes race, got a Beyer speed figure of 97. The Beyer figure view is really cool because it tells you in general how horses were doing before the race and whether they improved. So often it means, look, the class of the race was pretty good. You had a bunch of improving horses that came back and ran better in their next start. That's the sort of thing that I like to see. The incremental pace is the one that was asked about. This is just really nice because it can show you secret middle moves a lot of times, horses that maybe, and Gray Sky is kind of one of them. He ran almost as fast as the winner in that second quarter before tiring a little bit. Sometimes that's a sign, even without watching the replay, of a horse that maybe makes a little bit of a move and could be worth betting back. There's also the elapsed pace, which shows you the final time for each individual horse at each point of call. The DRF comments one, which is a nice one because you can generally, I know Pete, you like this one, to go through the card to see generally if horses were winning from, say, on the rail or in the outer paths. Particularly useful to just scroll through, take a look, see if you can find some trends at the track on that particular day. And then the form notes, which I'm not going to have trip notes for each of these races necessarily, but if you did have trip races for all the Churchill races or trip notes for all the Churchill races on May 30th, they would show up in here. You can see them kind of at a glance what your own eyes were seeing in the race.
And then those same different ways of customizing the splits are available in the past performances themselves as part of the customization. Mike, maybe just show really quickly how people can make those adjustments if they want to customize their PPs to their own specifications.
Absolutely. Well, it falls to the default of elapsed time and leader and winner, and I already changed it to incremental splits for this horse. So you can see the come-home times, and I don't use it as much necessarily on dirt, but we'll be jumping to the turf, a couple turf races at the end of the card. It's often a matter of who comes home best, and you can see the actual come-home times for each of these horses. Or you can also see, and I've got run-ups in there, you can see how fast each of the individual horses went, factoring in the run-ups, the actual fractions, even if they weren't the leader. And we'll add in the Moss pace figures, which are often very, very useful to see if maybe a horse was up close, like he was in the Pat Day Mile, somewhat close to a very, very hot pace that's set up for closers. Those are the kinds of things I like to look for in excuse seemingly poor efforts.
I'm putting myself in the minds of a viewer who's not that familiar with Formulator watching this show, and I think they're dizzy just because there's so much information. A powerful tool like the Moss pace figures, like we're going to present that without comment here. But if you go to that archive I mentioned before, drf.com/YouTube, you can watch whole webinars on each of the features within Formulator we're talking about. We're just trying to give you a taste today, talk about these Saratoga races. There's much more information available. If you go to drf.com/YouTube, check out our webinars on the individual topics. If you have further questions, hit up Mike, hit up me. We're happy to talk about this stuff all day, maybe do special segments on the podcast about it if we get an intriguing enough question, or maybe come up with a topic for a future webinar as well. Mike, anything to add on this race at Saratoga before we move on to the next one?
No, let's move on. We got 10 minutes, and we got a fun race in the 10th.
Let's do it. And Mike, we'll keep it with you. What are your thoughts on this Grade 1 Diana? Where are you landing? Maybe talk about it from the perspective of a multi-race bet like the Pick 4.
Well, the Diana is going to have a legitimate favorite in Miss Temple City, coming off of her last North American win, where she convincingly beat Boys in the Makers 46 mile. Huge buyer speed figure of 108 in that race, so much so that the Connections wanted to try her at Royal Ascot, where she ran well, finishing fourth in a field of 14 at 12-1. Now comes back to North America. She's going to be a big favorite. I think 3-1 is the morning line, but she's going to get bet even more heavily than that. I wouldn't be surprised if we see less than 2-1. So you really have to decide what you're doing with a horse like her. Are you using her singly and just defensively playing around with some others, or are you trying to take a stand and feel like she, by the nature of how much she's going to get bet, provides value for every one of the other runners in the race? And there's a number of ways you can help to answer that question. You can look at Graham Motion's stats with horses shipping. You could look at Graham Motion's stats at Saratoga or on the NYRA circuit in graded stakes. There's a lot of different ways you can tackle that. I actually like to look at things like that, and I think a horse like Miss Temple City might be a very logical winner, but at a short price, she's one that I would be willing to take a stand against. Graham does okay at Saratoga, but that's not his best track. 12% win rate the last 5 years in turf routes there. ROI is just $1.51. I think they might have bigger things in mind for Miss Temple City, and coming off the last race at Ascot, I'm hoping that something, maybe took something out of her, and she might need one before we see her best again.
Scott, I know you feel similarly, no need to go deeper into the case against Miss Temple City, but where are you looking to land in this race?
Well, if you could scroll down to Desita, Mike, that'd be great.
I will.
I really like this horse. Before I plunk my money down, though, one thing I always like to do is look to see I like to look to see how the horse finished in his last race. Now, I know you can't really watch, you can't show the video, but so you can get it started. Just click right there on the right and make it big, and then you'll see that Desita is the 2 horse. It's going to start showing the video, and I know we can't show it because it's going to get choppy on YouTube, but I can watch this race, and you know, what I'll normally do is I'll scroll towards the end of the race and see how the horse finished. And you know, as long as she finished well, so we see her going right there. She's getting an inside trip. I guess she's the one in blue.
It's a long race, so
it's a little choppy.
Here we go.
Right, so she's still not up there, but you know, it's a 1.25 mile race, and here she comes on the outside, and hopefully we'll get a sense of how the gallop out was. But it looks like she's not having a problem with this field. And this is a Grade 2 race. And let's see, she's about a length ahead right now. Let's see how the gallop out is. Well, it's a little zoomed in, but you know, clearly nobody's passing her. So yeah, to me, the gallop out is pretty important. So she gets my rubber stamp of approval. Now, if we get out of that, you look at the Saratoga workout, the last workout on July 17th, 48-1 on the training track. And here's another cool feature. You know, like so you can look to see like how she ran in comparison to all the other horses, and it looks like she and Reina de Batteria ran exactly the same time. They finished on even terms in the workout. So in that way, it's not, you know, it's not like she's 1 second better than every other horse. But what I also like to look at, yeah, go ahead and close that. If you go under settings, Mike, in the upper right, and just scroll down and make the maximum workouts display all.
Okay.
So we're going to, now you're probably going to have to scroll a bit to get back to Desita.
Right, because it's showing the workouts for every horse in the race, and I've got them merged, so you're seeing every work between every race.
Now look at all those works, and there's only one that's under 49, and it's her last workout on the Saratoga training track. So not only is it her best workout ever, at least for 4 furlongs, but it's on the Saratoga training track, which is notoriously slow track to get workouts on. So if you run a 48 workout on the Saratoga training track, you're live, you know. So you know, this is why I absolutely love this horse. Now, I know Mike also likes Reina de Batteria, which you know, that horse I'm going to include in my pick 4 too, because she was on even terms with Desita. But to me, it looks like all systems are go with Desita, and that's why you know.
Mike, any others you'd want to include here besides Reina de Batteria? Do you agree generally with Scott's case for Desita?
I do, and I think the other thing we didn't even mention about Desita, but is certainly worth mentioning, who's the best turf filly in the world right now? In my opinion, it's Tepin, and the one race Desita has run at Saratoga, she beat Tepin, going 1 mile and a 16th in the Boston Spa. So she clearly likes the track. She seems to be working well. I would not be shocked if she puts in a huge effort tomorrow. But I did note that when I did some trip work, and I love to use Trackus. You'll see my trip notes. More than 3. There's 4 horses were coming out of the Just a Game in their last start, including Recepta, who's going to be taking money on the I think his second choice on the morning line. But I noted that Reina de Batteria went 19 feet further than the winner, who was just much the best that day. But she went 49 feet further than Recepta, and she even went quite a bit further than Mrs. McDougall. It was essentially a blanket finish. She finished 7th, but it was essentially a blanket finish for 3rd. She wasn't really that far away from Recepta, going 49 feet further. I think she's sitting on a big race here.
All right, there's that idea. If you're interested in more of the Trackus data that Mike mentions, you can find it on our sponsor for today's webinar website, the New York Racing Association, NYRA.com. You'll get access a lot of cool information there, including that Trackus data if you want to augment your formulator notes with it. We've got only about 3 minutes left, guys. I've got a seersucker suit I got to squeeze into to get over there to Saratoga for opening day. But obviously, we still have the pay leg. It is a $25,000 claimer on the inner turf. Scott, we'll start with you. How many do you want to use in here in your pick 4, and how do you see weighting them?
Well, I'm probably going to use 4. Now, I know that Mike has probably checked out Chad Brown dropping in class, and he's going to let me know whether I'm wasting my money or not. But I'm going to include the 2 Winter Springs. Seeing that horse here tells me that Chad Brown wants to win this meet, because he's got tons of horses in every race, and here he's given up a horse that is not a bad horse. I don't think. It doesn't look like a bad horse. It just ran an 85. And it ran an 86 last year at Saratoga. So the fact that he's letting it go for 25,000 tells me that he wants to win. So I'm going to include that horse. But I'm sort of really interested in Dendrite. If you look now, this is it's a bomber. I'm covered if the favorite wins. If you go down to Dendrite, the 9.
Won at Saratoga before, I recall.
He did a big price too, I believe, right?
Yes, one of the races where famously every jockey decided to grab out of the gate. Not that I'm bitter or anything about missing that.
Yeah.
All right, so there's Dendrite. And if you look at Dendrite, I like a few things about it. I like the bug. So he's getting 7 pounds, right? So he's getting 7 pounds, and from some of the horses he's getting 9 pounds. Has a win at Saratoga, and has a nice bullet work at Belmont, July 16th. Now, I haven't done all my work on this race, but the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to see how does Carlos Martin do at Saratoga.
Well, we know he won last year with Dendrite at a huge price.
Yeah, was that last year?
Yeah.
45-1. Yep.
Yeah. So can lightning strike twice? Well, at 20-1, absolutely. I'm
sure.
I'm going to include that horse under any circumstance.
Sorry to hustle you along, Scott, but you did mention you had a couple of others to include here. I want to make sure we get Mike's thoughts. We've only got about 60 seconds left.
Sure. I would only include the Imposter and Dream Man for various reasons, and I'll let Mike take it from here.
Yeah, if you can maybe send some thoughts out on Twitter, Scott, if you want to go a little bit deeper into that. Mike, how about you? Who are you using in the pay leg here?
Well, before I do that, I want to talk about who I'm not using, and I'm not necessarily going to give out winners because I haven't done the full handicapping on this race. I did much deeper on the Diana, but I'm going to look at certain, especially in contest play. One of the things I love to use Formulator for, and I mentioned, is how trainers do with certain types of runners at the meet. And I believe we have a Wesley Ward runner in here that I'm trying to find, who I want to, and so I wanted to take a look. There he is, number 11, Amen Kitten, dropping out of a state bred race at Arlington in for the 25K tag. You look at how Wesley Ward has done at Saratoga, and you'll see, if we sort by odds, you'll see that there are a lot of horses that didn't win at short prices, and he generally doesn't win at any of the bigger prices. That's one of the nice things from a contest standpoint. I love to look at closing odds above 10-1 at Saratoga. He's 1 for 41. This horse is 12-1 on the morning line. If you're trying to look for a live horse to play in a contest, you might want to go elsewhere.
I think that sounds reasonable. If you guys have any further thoughts on how people are going to get paid in the pay leg, I feel like you've given folks a nice skinny ticket to get alive. And, Scott had some great ideas here. Mike, if you have anything subsequently you want to underline, just send it out via Twitter. You can find him at DRF Formulator. I want to thank the guys for going through this Saratoga Pick 4, showing some of the aspects of Formulator today. Scott Carson, appreciate you joining us here. Hit him up on Twitter at CarsoniPH with any further questions about his handicapping or the Public Handicapper Contest. Of course, we're going to thank Mike Hogan joining us, as always, doing such a good job putting together this slate of webinars and helping present them to you, the fans, who, of course, I want to thank most of all anybody who took the time out of their day to join us live or watch this replay via drf.com/YouTube. Always a pleasure getting to interact and meet so many of you. If you're watching live and you're in the Saratoga area, Come see me tomorrow at Ciro's. Going to be hosting a seminar at 11 o'clock with Mike Watchmaker, Mike Vesci, and Travis Stone, who's making the morning lines here at Saratoga. We will be back soon, and want to thank the sponsor, Naira, one final time. You've been watching a webinar produced by DRF.com.